Welcome, everybody. This is Sword Staff, the podcast where we talk about D&D and TTRPGs. This is going to have a different name mentioned a few times. I don't feel like changing them all. Just know we are Sword Staff. We were going to go by Tiny Hut, but this just feels better. Enjoy.
I'm just going to stand up and shoot an Eldritch Blast at this thing.
All right, go for it.
What the fuck?
There's no fucking way! Welcome everyone to the Tiny Hut where we tell tales and none of them are actual plays. I am Finn, your host. With me I have my guest, current co-host. I don't know what the fuck the format's gonna be here going forward. I got my buddy Lucian over here.
The format's just gonna be chaos. That's what it's gonna be.
That is, it's chaos and scuff. That's what it's gonna be. That's literally the whole thing.
Absolutely.
We are not a actual play podcast or anything of the sort. This is more of a talk show where we're going to go a little bit of back and forth, discuss certain things like recent topics, Reddit stories, usually from RPG horror stories, give a little discussion on those, introspective, what we can, any advice that we can give from very experienced D&D players.
Very experienced, yes.
And of course, we can also talk about, you know, maybe some horrible series of roles that we've...
Oh my god, I still have nightmares from that.
It was so bad, man.
So bad.
The context behind that clip, they had finished a dungeon, a very early dungeon. Y'all were what, level 2?
Yeah, we had to be level 2 because it was still like that. Yeah, we had just found Vienna, and we had thrown ourselves into that little underground area.
Exactly, yeah. And so low level, had already completed the dungeon. I had like one last surprise. Haha, here's one last thing to like, you will obviously defeat it, but it's supposed to be a harbinger of things to come. And it was not supposed to be a difficult fight. And it took like 4 to 5 rounds of combat.
Oh, it should have only taken like 2. It was just like, it wasn't even just us getting bad rolls. It was the enemy getting bad rolls too. You were rolling just as bad as we were.
I couldn't hit shit.
None of us could hit shit.
They rolled, I think, for 2 straight rounds of combat, 5 rolls total between 5 rolls total each round. There was 8 in a row that were natural ones, and I started getting scared as a DM.
Yeah, and well, it started out with Jess, like, you know, rolling a natural 1, and she's like, oh, you know what, let me just use my inspiration. Oh, you know what, it's gonna be a natural 1. And
she put the bad juju out.
She put the bad juju, and I said, I'm like, I knew it was gonna come, and it's gonna make me sad. And then just from there on out, it was just nightmare after nightmare. The dice gods did not like us that day.
They really didn't. And there's been a few times since I notoriously, for some fucking reason, as a DM, roll really, really well. And that becomes a problem because I legitimately, as a DM, I am not out to get my players. I actually am cheering for their victory. When I want them to have an easy fight where they feel like gods, I want to give it to them. But when I want to give them a challenge, I'm never aiming to kill them. I'm just aiming to make them kind of worry a little bit. Like, okay, this is where we really got to, like, a wrong step could mean the end. Like, that level, like, on the edge kind of gameplay. But I am still rooting for
5 banshees at us, yeah.
Meanwhile,
we can't defeat a single worm.
Which bodes really poorly when I'm like, okay, so you come across this green dragon who's actually infected and he's even stronger than a green dragon. It's like, oh, this is going to go so well.
Oh, and by the way, hi, everybody. My name's Lucian. Yeah. I didn't introduce myself right after yours. You can also call me Austin. Nobody ever calls me Austin. They just call me Lucian. But yeah, I've been playing D&D for, oh my God, at least 20 years. And that's saying something because I'm 27, but my dad used to play AD&D in college. Ooh. And when I got kind of into the whole fantasy dragons and liking that, he's like, hey, Austin, you want to play Dungeons Dragons? I'll be your DM and you and your brother can, you know, play. And he would, you know, DM for just me and my brother. It was like, you know, just like no maps, no like visuals. It was just kind of like theater of the mind stuff. We didn't even have minis. It was just kind of like a, hey, this is the your character is like 10 feet away, and we would kind of just like see how the dice would go from there. And then I stopped playing with him for I don't know, a period of like 5 some years, and then got right into 5e. So I went from AD&D to 5e. It was a big jump.
Did you get in 2014, or did you get in like a little bit later after?
Oh geez, like 5e?
Yeah.
I got into 5e. Let's see, it's probably been probably 2016 or so, like that, because I started my first campaign was Curse of Strahd.
Oh wow. Okay, yeah.
Yes, that was my first campaign. It was on Roll20. I actually played a character named Lucian, which is actually where I got my username from.
Hey, there you go. Well, I will say, not to brag, I got in right when it came out in 2014. I had a friend of mine who was obsessed immediately, got all the books that were available, including the starter set and everything. And we got straight into it. I made like the worst character ever. But being in since 2014 is so fun to have that experience of seeing it grow. And it is a perfect perspective to have now that we are 10 years later, getting ready for the new update for what is lovingly being called 5.5, though they will not admit to it. The 2024 Player's Handbook and all the new updates that come with that. And this week has been pretty big for that. We've been getting a lot of news. D&D Beyond, or I think it's been on D&D Beyond, right? It wasn't the Dungeons and Dragons.
Yeah, it was D&D Beyond. I think that's where at least what I'm reading it from is the UA PH playtest on D&D Beyond. I'm talking about
the videos that they've been.
Oh, the videos. Too. Okay.
Yeah, with Jeremy Crawford and Todd Kendrick, I think is his name.
That has to be, because that's Wizards of the Coast kind of like sponsoring it. So
yeah, and it's like I'm listening to this and I'm just getting more and more hype. Like the beginning of the UAs was getting a little like people weren't super into a lot of the stuff. I was, and I was excited for just a little bit of change, but I was noting like, okay, they could improve here, they could improve here. And for a while, it really seemed like they were trying to nerf some stuff, which is very against my own personal policy when it comes to DMing is I will very rarely nerf you. I would rather buff you and make everybody a little bit more strong because I have control of the monsters. I can make them match you. So giving you a couple extra things you can do is no big deal on me. And it seems like as a company, they've taken that idea to heart and said, oh, we're not going to bump your numbers, but let's give you some quality of life features. Let's give you some more shit you can do, some more options you can take.
They added a lot of like out of combat stuff for every class too.
Yes.
Which I think they did purposely because a lot of the, at least in other D&D podcasts and a lot of like YouTube, like especially like Critical Role, I've only watched a couple things in Critical Role, is that a lot of people, if they are watching or playing, like to, get down to the nitty gritty, like in the tavern or, around the campfire, having meaningful conversations with people or, moving through the streets and pretending, we're in a big city. What can we do? Well, I'm a fighter. I can only attack 3 times. Well, not anymore.
Yeah, and that's it. And for the most part, skills were always meant to be that sort of you invest in skills to do out of combat stuff. But when it becomes the fact that everybody gets skills and other shit they can do, it becomes a little bit of a side aspect. So fighter getting little things here and there. I mean, especially Battle Master. Oh my God. They got, that is nice. But even then, like, nothing got buffed. Nobody really had their numbers increased. Nobody's doing more damage. In fact, the biggest nerf that they've had so far, if they keep the changes, is to Great Weapon Master and Sharpshooter. They got rid of the, every attack you can take a -5 to add a 10, which I actually like. Like, is it very strong and very fun to use? Yes. Is it very hard as a DM to balance other players' enjoyment around? Not even my encounters, just making sure that everybody else feels like they're keeping pace. Also, yes, we had that issue of our Totem Warrior Barbarian just Great Weapon Mastering every fucking attack and just constantly dishing out, 40 to 60 damage in a turn every single time, Meanwhile, like our pseudo barbarian, you know, our lycanthrope blood hunter was really struggling to kind of keep up in the same similar role. And it kind of, you know, is a little bit hard to kind of keep up with. So I like what they've done with stuff like that, but everywhere else, like the options that they give you, the barbarian especially.
Oh, I'm so excited to talk about the barbarian. That's
using your strength through your abilities is so. Oh my God!
It's so 90s Conan the Barbarian, like just like being able to like do random crap just because you're strong. Like, I'm gonna flex my muscles so hard that, you know, I can dodge a fireball.
Yes.
They did. It's very good flavor. I think they really kind of put the barbarian into the let's have fun, because barbarians are fun. Barbarians are meant to be kind of goofy, at least in my opinion.
I think that might be just our experience.
Yeah.
We play with Tyler, man. It's only going to get goofy from there. But yeah, no, I agree. Like, there's a certain level of ridiculousness to the barbarian that you have to have. If you're playing them as like a super serious, like edgy loner kind of thing, well, that's all well and good. But I feel like those kinds of players tend to also really enjoy the little side stuff, little things that you can do outside of just combat. And so the adjustments that they've made are not only good on the base barbarian, but like the wild heart. This is like one of my favorite things that they did, which is that the wild heart, previously known as the totem barbarian, they changed it. So now every animal spirit that you can take is a different name. And also, I think from what I understand, you can, it might be specific ones, or maybe it might be all of them, but like on a long rest or something along those lines, at certain intervals, you can change what animal spirit you are embodying for each of those. And that is so cool for like, it's almost like the most wizardy that you can get as a barbarian, where you can start preparing for the upcoming fight and being like, yes, I'm going to inhabit the spirit of the wolf because I plan to fight with my friends and get that advantage from being within fighting range with them. Or, you know, we're down our knight and I need to pick up the slack. I'm going to embody this bear and really absorb all this damage. That is such a beautiful quality of life. But the funniest part to me during that video, I don't know if you've watched it,
I
but
don't think so.
He essentially said something along the lines of, and we said that we show you that there are different animals you can take, so it really enforces the fact that you can take a different one on each level, and it's completely fine. You can mix and match how you want. He then proceeds to essentially say, this was already a feature. You just can't fucking read.
I mean, Dungeons and Dragons players are not exactly known for being able to read well. So
No.
that's why they specifically have a term RAI and RAW, because Dungeons and Dragons players can't read.
You know, well, funnily enough about that, Jeremy Crawford is even guilty of this thing.
Yeah, everyone's guilty of that.
Does Tiny Hut have a floor, a protective floor?
No, it doesn't.
Yes, it does.
What?
Yep. And the first tweet he ever made for his sage advice, he said, no, there's no floor. A year later, he retweeted himself saying something along the lines of, Jeremy, read your own rules. Yes, it does.
Well, I like how our first podcast has to bring up Tiny Hut. So.
Of course. Why would it not? And now it is written very strangely. I don't think it's fully clear. Well, I would always rule that it has a floor.
I think it's because it says specifically here, a 10-foot radius immobile dome of force springs into existence around and above you. So
Yes.
Around and above obviously does not mention below. So I would think it is confusing.
But then notice what it actually says. I believe in the area it says hemispherical. Hemispherical means a dome with a floor.
Yes.
So it would actually have a floor. But not only that, the biggest evidence for this, is that Tiny Hut has always had a floor in previous editions.
Yeah, so, I mean, what kind of, like, if you're making a spell and you're like, oh, I'm going to make a spell that allows me to create a little hut, but I'm not going to add a floor because screw all you.
No 5th level wizard is going to invent a spell and not be paranoid enough about a bullet coming through the fucking ground to attack him. The dude's going to be paranoid and be like, it needs a floor, it needs a floor, it needs a floor.
And that's why Galder's Tower exists.
Mm-hmm. Oh, we love that spell. Yeah, very excited for all the 5.5, 2024 stuff coming out. That will, of course, come up in discussion later on, especially when the book fully comes out in September. It's very close.
So. Yeah.
But we will discuss that further going forward. Maybe a little bit of, mini D&D news here and there. I think will be a lot of fun to discuss. I think discussing the entirety of the news that's coming out about 5.5 would just be, we'd have to be here for a couple hours. So we cannot do that here. But over time, these are going to be a little bit shorter podcasts. And with that said, actually, I think we're about, 30 minutes in? We're doing a pretty good job on that. But I think we can actually go ahead and wrap up with a particular Reddit story that I found that is very appropriate for something that me and you went through, learned from, as well as our DM learned from, and is a good discussion to have about situations like this.
Mm-hmm.
Now, that said, I'm going to give you the preface. The person in question is not as well-meaning as our DM was.
Okay.
I pretty quickly get that.
Yes.
So, this is from reddit.com/r/RPG horror stories.
Love that subreddit.
Oh yeah, it's so fun. Well, if you like drama.
Secondary cringe.
If I'm honest, actually, I'm not one for secondary cringe, but for this,
it's an acquired
it's worth it. GM killed off my PC in the epilogue.
Oh, I already know where this is going.
We know where this is going. You can see why. I saw that and went, and that's perfect for the first episode. All right. It reads, hey, y'all. Was this written by me? Hey, y'all. Title is the TLDR. The GM killed off my PC in the epilogue in a kind of fucked way. And to be honest, not sure if I'm being dramatic about this, but I wanted to get it off my chest regardless. There was 4 of us. A paladin, monk, rogue, and me. Paladin, monk, rogue, and me. And most of the campaign was great. A blast of a time. GM was great, but the ending for the rogue and me felt like a slap in the face. The only person to get a quote-unquote good ending was the monk. The paladin drank a potion of dragon's majesty to defeat the BBEG and flew off as a dragon due to a failed wisdom save. The monk went off to take care of the land with their childhood friend turned partner. Admittedly, these were bittersweet, narratively satisfying endings. Good for them. Things get a little scuffed when it comes to the rogue and I. Our PCs had known each other beforehand, and we're working through, I assume, okay, typo, it's fine. We're working through some relationship/abandonment issues due to backstories. During the last session, we finally managed to fully resolve things during downtime, and our silly critters were together. GM asked us what we imagine happened during the epilogue. We said some cute stuff about honoring the paladin and setting down some roots. After that, the GM was like, well, that's not what actually happens. You get your arm cut off in the middle of the night and are murdered. Rogue was like, well, if it's happening in our house, I'm going to stab him. GM shut that down and anything else we had suggested our characters would do, effectively robbing both of us of our agency just to kill off my PC for what I assume was shock and angst factor. I'm already upset because I feel like my PC was killed at the very end for no reason, but also because ending the campaign in this way effectively threw out the entire character arc for both the rogue and myself. After the session ended, GM was gloating about how they won D&D because it was so, yeah.
That right there is like the biggest red flag for a DM.
That is like, that was the key point where I was like, there's the huge difference. in our situations. GM was gloating about how they won D&D because it was so upsetting, and like that part isn't that big of a deal, but it was incredibly condescending and just rubbed salt in the wound. I talked with the rogue and monk after, and they also felt like it was cruel, but I don't know. I want an outside perspective because we're obviously biased due to our attachments to our PCs. Admittedly, I was and am more than a little attached to this PC, as this was the first finished campaign I've played in, and I was really happy with their narrative arc pre-epilogue. I have another campaign lined up with this GM, but to be honest, I really don't trust them with my characters anymore. Losing all control I had over my PC and having them killed off for angst broke a lot of the trust I had with this GM, but I'm not sure if I'm being dramatic because the rest of the campaign went well. TLDR, GM killed off my PC in the epilogue, and I don't really trust them anymore. Am I overreacting?
No, not at all. That is an awful thing for a GM to do. Not only because like of what he said, oh, I won D&D, but it's just like, you know, players really like their characters. It is like almost like a child sometimes. Like I fall deeply in love with every single character I make. I buy art for them and all this good stuff. You know this.
Oh yeah.
And to have them like kind of trashed like that is emotionally offensive to me.
And we have experience with this.
Mm-hmm.
The ending for our Descent into Avernus game, our GM, who, to show you how this actually, in certain situations, this is not always a deal breaker. We had a communication breakdown. Your epilogue for your character was unsatisfying, to say the very least. At the very least, at first, without context.
Heavily, yes.
It was very much in the end, you lose.
Mm-hmm. Which nobody likes. I mean, there's some people who are like, I'm okay with tragedy and angst.
Yeah.
But like, unless you and your DM specifically sit down and say, hey, I want this to happen to my character, I'm okay with you doing whatever you'd like with it. Hearing this story, obviously there is no other reason the DM did this besides, you know, hey, I finally won in the end. I got you.
Yeah.
But it's just the worst way of doing it.
And I am the ultimate optimist. I am always one for second chances. To the OP who wrote this, if you are at all worried about like maybe the GM had like some level of good intention here, it really comes down to communicating with your GM, because we did find out, or rather you found out, because I actually knew this beforehand. Your bad ending for your character was supposed to actually be a bit of a setup. Me and our GM, Anu, who is fantastic. We still play with her. I'm in several of her games. But we've had some learning experiences, including this one. Me and her discussed that because of the nature of the game, and you had a little bit of a late entrance, it was a little harder for us to really explore your character's backstory and kind of delve into the mysteries of your hidden past. So I said, hey, Anu, because she actually runs a paid game for us. So I said, hey, Anu, for a birthday gift for Lucian, I want to pay for an extra game for him where we run a one shot to explore his backstory more, where we can make it like, and it was going to be a birthday backshot is not the fucking correct thing to say. I
don't want birthday backshots, Tim. No, thank you. No, that's not my kind of gift. I'm going to just have to say no thank you to that one.
Oh, this is scuffed. I did not expect episode 1 to have birthday backshots. That is not the fucking title. I know I'm going to have to come up with a title, but that cannot be it. But it was supposed to be a birthday one shot where we explore your character. It was very well intentioned. Like, I don't think there's any denying that Anu especially had only the best intentions for the outcome. The execution, however, was miscommunicated. And very much did come off at the time, I'm sure, especially for you, as a fuck you, I win. Like, you don't get to have a happy ending.
And it was specifically like more it was devastating for me because I had specifically made a backstory for Derelict, and I had shown it to Anu, and she said, "Oh, well, don't worry about it. I've got this." And so I'm like, okay, this is great. Taking a look at the backstory that I sent her, she's going to maybe, take a piece of that and add it into my backstory or my epilogue backstory and all that stuff. And then, bam, my Derelict, the character I've grown to, love and everyone else loves too, immediately gets possessed by a demon and runs off as a monstrosity, which if it was just that, I would be like, a little unhappy. But that specifically was the opposite of what Derelict wanted. It was like he was a reflavored Simic hybrid who was trying to figure out his humanity, but instead the remnants of humanity was taken from him. So it was a kick in the groin. It was a bit of sand in the face, and at the moment I was very, very unhappy.
In your eyes, it was literally that kind of ending is a fate worse than death kind of thing.
Yeah.
It is the antithesis of what he was aiming for. And in the end, by the way, just for anybody who is worried, the communication was made known. We talked about it. We have since Anu took that as a learning experience as well. In this past game that we also just finished, she ahead of time was reaching out to each of us to say, "Hey, what are you thinking for your epilogue? What do you want this to go off as?" And it was fantastic. We each got to actually have our input. I really liked the way that it came off this time. We had one that had a very similar ending, but that was purely discussed by the player.
Yeah, he loved
the GM. He is a little gremlin of fucking chaos who loves that his Path of the Totem barbarian who made a deal with a demon got turned into an axe.
Yep. I mean, hey, Thung would want that.
He would absolutely want that. He was essentially playing Grog.
Yeah, basically.
Anu, by the way, as a little side note, is finally watching Vox Machina for the first time, and she messaged me being like, "Oh wow, Thung really was just Grog." I'm like, yeah, he was. and that's what it comes down to is, and you're gonna find this is a very big theme going forward when we read these Reddit stories, is there's a lot of these that are communication issues.
Yeah.
There are so many times where something that, if it just came off like you ended that session there with no communication and then posted what happened to a Reddit story, it could easily come off as my DM fucking sucks, or this other player is the worst. And it's like, well, that's why I always kind of like, I have the policy of taking a beat, letting things rest for a second, and then going back and communicating with it.
Yeah, a lot of the stories on RPG horror stories can be simply solved by a single sentence. Be an adult and sit down with the players or the DM.
Exactly.
I mean, it's in the case of like, the DM was being an asshole, leave the game.
Yes.
It's just like a game.
If you open up communication and they're still being a dick, leave. There's no D&D is better than some D&D.
Yeah, if it's offensive or in some cases even like illegal, I've seen a couple of more like the DM is being like SAing and stuff like that. Like it's that obviously is an immediate like get the hell out. But I
have been in my car listening to RPG horror stories being read, and I'll just hear something like, I was 13 and my uncle was the other player who is really hitting on my character. And I just like in the car go, ah! Leave! But like when it comes to this situation, it really seems like it was just a shitty GM moment. Now, if you talk to the GM and the GM is like, hey, I am so sorry. That was like not cool of me. That I don't know what was coming over me. Let's work together to make sure that doesn't happen again. Dude, that is awesome. Stick with that GM. You're good, right? If you had a great time throughout the rest of the campaign and he is willing to talk to you about how that ended and realizing his behavior was inappropriate, fantastic. I say, yeah, go for it. But the communication needs to be opened. Now, if he's still like, get over it, tragedy happens. you can hop out. There's no love lost there, man.
Yeah, if the response from the GM is it's my game, I can do what I want, then you need to leave, because that DM is obviously playing God. And from what he said, like, you know, I won D&D, that's a huge red flag. Like, I would heavily take that into consideration when talking to them, unless they are like extremely apologetic. I personally would leave. That's just me being. You're the optimist. I'm more on the pessimistic side when it comes to that kind of thing. That's just my opinion.
Always safety is the biggest one. If you are feeling unsafe, no matter how apologetic they are, leave. But otherwise, yeah, my advice is obviously communication, and if things can be worked out, things can be worked out. That said, if you leave because you're uncomfortable and you just like, trust is a big thing. And if you think that in the back of your head for the rest of the next campaign, you're just going to be worried the entire time, that might be a thing of like, I'm going to cut it off. I don't think that I can really engage with this campaign now, because I'm going to always have that in the back of my mind. I mean, it comes down to that with relationships too. Now, I chose this Reddit story for another reason. And that is because with this show, I don't want it to all be negative. I know that in this recording alone, there's going to be like some things I'm going to cut out to just be like, hey, I want to make it a little bit more of a positive message. That's why I record these instead of, you know, live streaming or something. And this one is perfect because a lot of these Reddit comments, you'll either find people who are being, you know, fucking awful, or you'll find people just being supportive and stuff. I don't think I've ever seen a more supportive comment than the highest rated comment on this post. Are you ready for this?
Absolutely.
From Douglas W. Fail. Hi, you don't know me, but I'll be your new temporary GM if you'll let me. Their words, sorry. And you wake up in a cold sweat. You frantically look around. Both your arms are still there. You look out the window. Rogue and the two silly little critters are all running around and enjoying the slowly rising sun. You begin to calm down. Your heart is beating normal again. Everything is okay. It's been over a year since it all ended. The dreams were bad at first, but have been happening less and less frequently. It's been months since you've had one this bad. It feels like maybe it's the last one this time. That is going to be the end of today's episode, guys. Welcome to the Tales of the Tiny Hut, or from the Tiny Hut, in the Tiny Hut, talking in the Tiny Hut. We'll figure it out. We'll figure it out. Whatever looks better in Photoshop. But until next time, we'll see what these are going to be like. Maybe they'll be weekly. Maybe they'll be bi-weekly. We will see. But I hope you all have a great rest of your day. Lucian, thank you so much for being here in the inaugural episode of Tales from in/to the Tiny Hut.
It was a pleasure being around the campfire with you.
Yes. All right. Have a great night, everybody. Love you. Or a great day. We'll see you when I upload this.
Bye-bye.
Bye, everybody.